I know it's a long day, so I'm going to spare you and provide you with a ghoulish Halloween special. Now, before we start, by raise of hands, how many of you are entrepreneurs? Okay. How many of you are working on building products? Nice. And who won't raise their hands no matter what I ask? Okay, fair enough. Okay, so these stories are about resilience, empathy, anger management across an interval of about 11 years. I handpicked about 3 tales, and in order to prepare for this talk, I tried to see if there are some commonalities between these stories. So basically, I had a live retrospective, and it all started 25 years ago when I received a computer from my parents. I was the visionary type that had no idea, absolutely no idea what this tool will do for humanity. I was 6, you can't blame me. So my parents thought I was smarter than I actually was because I was their kid. So they decided to put me into elementary with children that were 1 or 2 years older than myself. So basically, I got into competition from an early age, and this helped me exercise my so-called struggle muscles, right? So the idea is that this struggle became a sort of common theme in my life as I would see in the future. And the thing was that I remember that my parents sort of tried to strike a wicked deal with me, and they said something more or less along these lines: "Son, we sold the kidney for you in order to buy you this computer, so basically, please behave and have good grades, or else." Basically, my father provided me with an offer I can't refuse, and I had a meme with the Godfather that was basically illustrating this. Moving on, this offer basically did not get me very excited into actually using the computer, although I did try to play around with it when my father wasn't playing on the computer. Can I have a different sticker? Clicker? Okay, great. So the idea was that I basically spent my childhood working with Lego blocks, and I got this builder mentality, as you can see from this image. And a few years later on, I basically tried to learn how to code. And during the dark ages of puberty, I basically found the holy grail of open source with this penguin right here, which is the logo of Linux. And what this made me do is to develop the high curiosity for all of the things around me. And this curiosity basically made me get involved in different projects. So some humble brags. I started a few companies. Some of them were e-commerce, some of them were trainings, and of course building software. And I'm most proud of the fact that we've organized community events for startups during 5 years, and these were about 35, and some of these participants got to develop their startups, and I thought it was really important to support the leadership in this startup sector. So some of them are in the expo area or pitching, and that's really nice. Now, moving on, let's meet bus success. So most of the people, when we're thinking about happiness and success, we're thinking of a sort of linear type of thinking, and reality shows that it's more complex. So I think I'm fairly good in the statistics. Although I'm at my 4th attempt, it seems that at your 5th or 6th bankruptcy, you're trying to still figure things out. And for my teammates that are in the room right now, we're basically at the very beginning, and this is the whole journey we need to take. I'm sorry you had to basically find out today. but better late than never. Okay, so let's talk about the first story. The first story, first endeavor, because it wasn't called entrepreneurship back then, I tried to promote Romanian classical musicians, and I had this really genius idea of the project name, which was For Free Free. It was the best inside joke ever, because the idea was that in the last century there was this composer called John Cage, and he basically sat in front of the piano and did nothing. And that's a great metaphor. I mean, from silence, music is called up into existence. Of course, this failed miserably because nobody from the inside knew the inside joke. So that was a problem. And the idea is that for this project, this was in my second year of university, I did customers interviews, I did the UX part, the development, I tried doing sales, content. So this was like a one-man show type of performance. And I can do that because I have sweet multitasking skills. But joke aside, this was a tough time because I had to do all of those things. And the more you learn about a specific niche or industry, the more you can see that there are some systemic things that you can't actually solve. So for example, we had a vicious circle where in order to promote the musicians, you had to pay the NGO that safeguards their intellectual property. But this NGO wasn't necessarily interested in promoting the musicians in the first place unless they had political influence. So this happened that intellectual property basically became a pain in the donkey. And the idea is that in order to get content, I talked with a lot of people that were in the industry. I went to a concert hall and there were people that were writing pamphlets in order for them to promote the musicians. I asked for those pamphlets in electronic format because they would not publish them on their site. And the answer I got was that if I publish them on the internet, nobody will pay them in a physical format and they'll lose their jobs or something like that. So this was in the prehistoric 2008. And although email was discovered in the late 2000s, the CVs of young musicians were basically written by hand. Okay, and the thing is that at that moment in time, I tried to do a lot of things and I thought I could do that because, oh, youth, like Shakespeare said here. And I have some key takeaways for this. So idealism is really cool if you're a philosopher. It sucks for real life. I empirically discovered or rediscovered Stoicism. I know it's a trend among male followers for Stoicism to be a good philosophy, a good pragmatic philosophy. And the status of this project is dead and buried. Moving on, the Gospel of Mark. Years later, we went to do outsourcing for a client in Texas. And of course, there's no country greater than Texas. They have this mindset, this interesting mindset that's summed up on this slide. And the idea was that we were doing e-learning products for mostly governmental agencies. We did not have a widespread adoption rate yet, but we did try to have a plan to rule the world. So I met Mark, and he had let's call him Mark, not his real name, of course. And he had a technical co-founder, which was Matthew, another evangelist. Matthew seemed too cold for my taste, but there's actually a plot twist to that later on. We did these developments of the e-learning platform, and this was funded based on the client work. So this is basically a pragmatic approach for you to fund your product, but on the long run, if you do too much outsourcing and adapting your product to only one client or a range of individual clients, then your product development skills will get rusty. And of course, at the same time, you don't want to run out of money, and you want to have the team vibe in an ever-increasing positive frequency, especially since we were at a time zone difference and also miles apart. So we had some success. We helped the current US president get elected because it wasn't Russia. Because basically we had this e-learning software with, they have electronic voting machines, and they need to basically know how to use them. So it seemed like it was a good time, but basically things got from good to bad and then to worst really fast, because Mark got cancer, and his health deteriorated. And although he was doing chemo, this did not actually help. And after a few months of struggle, basically, on my birthday, Mark died. So this was a little shocking for me. And of course, it confronted me with my own mortality. And some weeks before this happened, I remember Matthew sending me a message saying, "Stefan, please say a prayer for Mark." And under those circumstances, basically, you become religious very fast, or as needed. And that's how I basically understood that we were friends at the professional level. And the thing was that Mark was one of those Ironman. Basically, he did triathlons, he was vegetarian, he was a family guy, and you would think that these individuals don't die of early age. But of course, karma has its way. And it became apparent to me that after the business brains got out of the business, I had to help Matthew transition from T to E, from being a technical to being an executive. And I basically learned that he actually was an executive in his early ages, in his early youth. He was the CEO of a company of 300 plus employees that basically now has a near unicorn valuation. So I stuck around for another year or so until he could afford hiring other people. And I think last year I flew to Texas, stayed at his house, and he thanked me personally for what I did. And this sort of was enriching for me as a human being. I like to think that the role I played, although it was my company, the role I played was the guy that went the extra mile. So this was a hard lesson in empathy and resilience. And the results were that this company basically survived and flourished. So status, blood-sucking still, since we have the Halloween theme. Okay, moving on to the crypto story. So the crypto story goes like this. About 1 or 2 years ago, I got involved with my company in doing blockchain development. We were doing some cryptographic work for some wallets, blah, blah, blah. And after that, soon after that, I basically became a sort of co-founder to this real-time data processing platform that was related to the blockchain. It did not feel that glamorous. And when building a software MVP, basically you're already bombarded with information about how to do that. Like, for example, you can do either Agile, you can do Kanban, Scrum, Lean. We basically wanted this Lean thing, right? The really bare example of the software. My co-founders are in the City of Angels. They're doing some other things. And we basically had the philosophy of duct taping this engine in order to see if it worked. So we wanted to solve this problem fast. Along this journey, we fired about 20 or so IT professionals coming from Ukraine, Iran, Turkey, and of course Romania. And we did not necessarily find people aligned with this problem, with this solution, because they did not feel that it was too ethical. And of course, we got into debates about how to actually program the thing. And on the Java level, that's actually very true. We just wanted the horse, but first we need to build the horse factory. And before we need to build the horse factory, we need to analyze the situation and have a plan for the horse factory, and so on and so forth. So this basically got us into learning Python the hard way. I don't get any commissions, but this is still a good book. And the thing was that the funniest encounter we had was with a Romanian company that basically said that we should be giving them the client up front, or we can receive a small fee from the sales of this software. So this was a twisted type of funny, because basically the idea that build it and they will come, we only focus on the software, who's going to market it, especially since software development is becoming a commodity. So the idea of build it and they will come basically means that this only works in Dubai and in this weird movie. So the idea is that we had some lessons. My personal lessons were that you don't need to take yourself too seriously, but you should actually take your goals very seriously. The humor part is important. It does, otherwise you get into some weird psychotic states. And the idea is that nobody will actually work like you as the co-founders. So for the entrepreneurs, individuals, you should get over that as soon as you can. Some results I have, well, I survived one burnout and half of life crisis, so I'm a little anxious for what's waiting, actually. And the status of this project is that it is still crawling. Okay, now, the idea is that when you have a delicate situation, you basically want to manage it as good as possible. So, for example, from our case, we try to delegate as much of the responsibility as possible related to developing this software. And at the same time, we expected a high degree of preciseness for the software to be done. Okay. So some food for thought as a sort of summary for all of these three stories. There's a build part and there's a struggle part. For the build part, I think you should focus on building, metaphorically speaking, yourself before you build the product, because people need you at your most competent level. And of course, you need yourself at your most competent level. So you should invest in yourself. Build bridges, not walls. I had to put this election year meme here. Sorry for that. If your life is not what you want it to be, you can change it today, tomorrow, 20 years from now, or change yourself, which is a better investment, but it's harder to do. And on the struggle part, basically, the struggle is real, as you saw from the T-Rex that couldn't eat the pizza. You should cultivate resilience, maybe use a little bit of suffering as your teacher, but don't overdo it. You don't want trauma in your life, or if you do, I know a good psychotherapist in the audience. And of course, one thing I personally had to do was to try to be good or great at more than one thing. So I know that that's not the usual path that's promoted in the media, but I think that you can actually do that, but you have to put in the effort to metaphorically shed some skin, some personality, or burn the karma so the whole planets align in order for that transformation to occur. Okay, you should also focus on what you can control. Mindfulness helps in relaxing yourself. You should do exercises. They're sort of the, scientifically speaking, they're sort of the closest thing to happiness that we have. And I need to remind myself constantly that I should celebrate every success I have, like this talk, for example. I'm really bad at doing that, and I also need to remind myself that people don't actually care about your spammy advice. So, happy Halloween. Thank you. If there are any questions.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. Any questions? Let's check Slido first. If you have in the audience some questions. Mauro. Yep. Please.
Yes. You mentioned this fact that before succeed, you need to fail a certain amount of time. But what is your best takeover about the fact that to fail, but to fail as less time as possible?
Okay, thank you for the question. I don't necessarily think that you should fail in order to succeed, but I do think that the approach related to failure is the important one. You should not get depressed about it or things like that, and take it just as an experience. I mentioned in one of the key takeaways that you should build bridges, and the insight here is that you should build bridges as you walk on them, so that you have as little resources as possible wasted. So because life's too short to build something that nobody actually wants. So there's a certain degree of uncertainty to building things, and at the same time, the more information you have from the market, from everyone else, from the degree of your social karma helps you in succeeding. So as little as possible is the desirable way, of course, but we can't be fixed on that and say, oh, if for 5 times I can't do that, then I'm going to stop because I was expecting. So for example, we have a good metaphor from nature. A chick that's learning to fly won't say, oh, I'm going to flap my wings 20 times. If I don't succeed, then I'll give up. So only humans do that. Only humans have these types of computations in their heads. So I think we should learn from that, if that answers your question.
One second.
So, hi, Stefan. Nice presentation, by the way. I have a question about your Bruno Mag concept, or what are you doing actually? Like.
Okay. At the moment, we're doing software development, providing solutions in the e-commerce and e-learning sectors. I personally am also doing this blockchain thing. And recently, we started doing recruitment in IT because we were technical enough to understand the mindset of IT individuals and how they actually want to be treated, because we had the problem of getting people that were culturally fit into our organization and not just their hard skills, which I personally think that can be learned along the way.